So, that first week of December football hit kinda different, huh? Not only were the games extremely exciting, but there were lots of unexpected outcomes and things that have changed the very landscape of the NFL and how things could go the rest of the way through, heading into the playoff race, and even the MVP conversation. And now, here in this next week, in week 14, everything could be on the line to finally settle the big picture. So many teams have a big time chance to either catch up or even take the lead in specific races, so this one is going to be super important. And I don't just mean that for the teams and all the players, I mean that for myself too. I had a really terrible week. I went 7-6 in week 13, which is my worst stretch by far in any video I've done so far this year. So I'm looking to come back and show that maybe I'm not that stupid after all. And as we look into the games ahead, first one, not so exciting. The Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New England Patriots on Thursday Night Football. God, why do they always put these absolute stinkers on Thursday, man? It's insane. The New England Patriots continue to have all sorts of offensive woes as they literally did not score a single point in a game against the Chargers. Had they even scored one touchdown, that would have been enough to win the game. The fact that they're keeping these teams to such little points, but their offense can't do anything to actually help them win is really pathetic. You thought that it couldn't get any worse than Mac Jones, but apparently it can. So that alone puts them in a situation where it's not looking like they're going to win any games at all, but they're playing a Steelers team who isn't in the best place either. They just lost a tough game to the Cardinals. Kenny Pickett's down again, so it's up to our guy Mitch Trubisky to keep it going. So realistically, there should be exactly zero offense being played in this game. It should be a defensive showdown, and it honestly might end in a 0-0 tie. But to pick a winner, I think I'm going to go with the Steelers for the simple fact that while their offense is bound to also be really bad against that good Pats defense, they do at least have some talent on that side of the ball. They're prone to making some big plays happen with their skill position guys, with Jalen Warren and Najee Harris and George Pickens and whatnot, and the Pats just don't really have any of that, so the Steelers might break off that one big play that gets them into scoring range for one time, and that honestly might be enough because the Pats offense really is that bad. For the 1 p.m. slot, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Atlanta Falcons, a big-time NFC South matchup that the Buccaneers simply cannot afford to lose. If they lose this one, there's probably a very small chance of them coming back and winning the division, so it's must-win territory for Baker and the guys, and they haven't exactly been looking that sharp recently. I was trying to defend them for a while, but after almost losing to the Panthers last week, I don't really know how much I can trust them. The Falcons are coming off a pretty decent couple of weeks. They didn't look too good in the Jets game, but they did play really well against the Saints. It seems like they step up in those NFC South divisional battles. The Bucs have kind of been on a skid as of late, so I think I'm actually going to go with the Atlanta Falcons. I think it could go either way. These divisional battles are always a toss-up, but maybe the Falcons offense can do a bit more, and maybe their defense is a bit more inclined to pull off a big stop like what we saw in the Saints game. Plus, the Falcons did beat them the last time they played, so might as well stick with them. Speaking of divisional games, in that 1 p.m. slot also is the Lions versus the Bears. This one's kind of interesting for a few reasons. One, the last time these two played, the Bears almost beat them. It took a miracle comeback at the end of the game for the Lions to avoid a very disastrous defeat. And they haven't looked all that great since that Bears game in general. They've been struggling to finish opponents off, like we saw in the Saints game last week. And on Thanksgiving, they got absolutely destroyed by the Packers. Things have not looked very good for Detroit as of late, and they're prone to getting upset once again. But I do think they're going to come back and they're going to finally have a strong performance. They're overdue for one. I feel like this team can't go on a skid forever. They're too talented for that. They're clearly the best team in their division still, at least from like a talent standpoint. So they've just got to take this one, right? The Bears, they're hungry and they're well rested off of a bye week. They're serious upset potential, but I'm going to roll with the better team. Next up, the Colts versus the Bengals, which is suddenly a lot more interesting than you'd think it'd be if we were talking about this matchup, let's say, at the beginning of last week. Without Joe Burrow, the Bengals marched into Jacksonville and they defeated them. With Jake Browning at quarterback, they put up an offensive explosion. win. 34 points, with Browning looking like he might as well have been Joe Burrow out there, just picking apart that Jaguars defense. His confidence is building, it was a well-needed victory for the Bengals, and it might just put them back on track to maybe make a playoff appearance even without Joe Burrow. But it's not going to be easy, as they're playing a Colts team that is looking pretty decent themselves. They're fighting for playoff positioning. They're 7-5 right now. They're on a 4-game winning streak as well. I don't know if the Bengals can necessarily win a second straight, just because I don't know how much I can trust Jake Browning on a week-to-week basis. But for the sake of being risky and trying to have a better record compared to last week, I think I'm going to go with the Bengals. The Bengals still do have a really good team, and if Jake Browning can just continue to build up that confidence like we've seen over the last few weeks, he might be able to pull off some magic yet again. This Colts defense has looked really good in recent weeks, but it has been against some pretty weak opponents, so they might end up getting shocked by this Bengals team too. Plus, I'm of the belief that the Colts will not go on a 5-game winning streak. That just sounds too good to be true. They're overachieving big time, and I think it's time for them to be at least a little bit sent down to earth. Next is another toughie, the Jaguars versus the Browns. We really don't know what's going to happen with Trevor Lawrence. Thankfully, he's not out for the season, but with such a bad high ankle sprain, you'd have to imagine he's going to miss at least 1 week. I'm of the assumption that he won't be playing and that it'll be CJ Beathard in there. And if that's the case, I don't know how he's going to handle this Browns defense. He looked okay for like 1 drive in that Bengals match. He got them into field goal range to keep that game going. But against a hardcore Browns defense like this, that's kind of been on a skid as of late, I don't know how he's going to do. I almost feel like the Browns are going to come back strong and somehow get this win. Maybe they'll be back with their normal quarterback situation as well, so it can be a decent matchup where there's not a lot of points scored. And in those games, that's usually where you trust Cleveland to come through with their defense, and then they get like some sort of game-winning field goal at the end. So I think I'm going to go with the Browns for the simple fact that I don't trust the Jaguars quarterback situation at all, and they're also missing Christian Kirk. Too many injuries. Moving on, another NFC South battle, the Panthers versus the Saints. Honestly, I think there is some upset potential here. I can see a world where the Panthers stun the Saints. The last time they played, it was kind of close, and the Saints recently, they've just been so up and down. Their QB situation could be a little weird this week as well. I could really feel an upset maybe in the works, but I'm going to resist and say that the Saints win, mostly because the Panthers just aren't trustworthy. The Saints do have a pretty talented defense and a better team overall, and you'd expect them to just execute more as veterans compared to a Panthers team with not a lot of experience that's just had nothing but execution issues down the stretch of a game where they potentially have been in positions to win matches. Until they actually start capitalizing, I think you have to pick whoever they're playing to win. Next up, the Houston Texans versus the New York Jets. And oh my lord, New York is falling apart. It is on fire over there. Somehow an even worse situation than the Giants, as their QB situation continues to get worse and worse and worse. Tim Boyle is terrible, and Zach Wilson doesn't even want to be the QB anymore. The Jets can't put up any points, even with their defense deadlifting like no tomorrow. And in a game against the Texans, with CJ Stroud, a team that could be making the playoffs this season, yeah, the Jets are not going to keep up. Over time, their defense is going to get worn down, and with no points to be found, they're going to lose in epic fashion yet again. Next up, the Rams versus the Ravens. Another one of those games that maybe has some intrigue for upset potential. The Rams, their offense has finally been clicking. Matt Stafford looks pretty good out there again. He's getting Puka and Cooper Kupp involved. Their run game's back at full strength. Aaron Donald could always be a problem. He could disrupt the Ravens' game plan with their run game a lot for sure. I could see it, but I think I am going to stick with the Ravens to win this game. They're coming off a bye. They're well rested. They're going to be well prepared for this one, and their defense is just a lot more reliable. The Rams' defense is not very good at all. The Ravens are just more inclined to get a big stop when the game's on the line, and with how good they are with the run game and Lamar operating how he has this season, they'll probably clutch out a win that's maybe a bit close for comfort. Entering the 4 p.m. territory, you've got the Vikings versus the Raiders. This one, I'm not really too sure. The Vikings are definitely the better team on paper, but after what I saw in the Bears game, I don't know. Maybe they're going on a cold streak and the Josh Dobbs magic is starting to run out a little bit. The Raiders' pass defense isn't that bad, so the Vikings might end up struggling. Although at the same time, I believe that this time for real, Justin Jefferson could be coming back from IR to play his first game in many, many weeks, and that could be the main difference maker that pushes the Vikings over the top, but it may take some time for him to get back up to full speed, at least in my eyes. He might start off a little slow as him and Josh Dobbs learn to connect a bit. So I'm going to pick the Raiders. The Raiders are one of those teams who really don't feel that good, but every once in a while go on a random streak. Like they'll win one, they'll lose a couple, they'll win a couple, they'll lose a bunch more, and now I feel like they're almost overdue to get back in the W column after going on a bit of a losing streak. Maybe they can find some kind of hole in that Vikings defense and edge out an ugly game. I don't know, I just have this feeling that the Raiders might take this. Maybe I'm an idiot, but that's who I'm picking. Also at 4 o'clock, the Seahawks versus the 49ers. This rivalry can always be interesting. Sometimes these guys play each other really close, but with how much the 49ers are rolling right now and after that huge win over the Eagles, there's absolutely no reason to not be picking them. They're at home as well. They're in a rhythm. Their offense looks absolutely amazing. They're torching people in the pass and the ground game. They have so many superstars. They're arguably the best team in football right now. So I don't know if Seattle has much of a chance. They showed some improvement in that Dallas game, which was great, but that's not enough to beat San Francisco. Niners all the way. This just shouldn't even be close. In one of the 4:25 p.m. slots, the Chiefs play the Buffalo Bills in quite possibly the game of the week. A rivalry that has spanned a couple of years now and literally changed the overtime rules. Buffalo and Kansas City is always a fun time, and typically Buffalo actually gets the better of the Chiefs in the regular season. And I actually think they're going to once again here. I'm picking Buffalo. The Chiefs are significantly better at Arrowhead, don't get me wrong, but I just don't like how they've played the last handful of weeks. It just doesn't look like the same Chiefs team that I'm accustomed to. The receivers continue to drop so many balls, they have butterfingers like crazy, and losing that Packers game is not a very good look at all. And I get the feeling that Buffalo's going to put up a lot of points. They have finally started to figure stuff out on that side of the ball. They looked good in the Eagles game, even though they lost. They put up a ton of points against the Jets. They're just figuring something out now, and I think that it's probably going to come down to a shootout in a high-scoring matchup like we've seen in the past, and that does not favor a Kansas City Chiefs team that has such unreliable wide receivers. They're bound to make a big mistake in the clutch, and if the Chiefs even make one of those, then that could be enough for Buffalo to win. This Chiefs team more so relies on keeping the score kind of low, like manageable. They prefer to be ahead, and in a battle against Buffalo, I just don't think they're going to have that luxury. The Bills really need to win this game. Obviously, this rivalry means a lot to them as well. They're desperate to get in that W column and keep their playoff hopes and dreams alive, and I think because of their more skilled skill position players that can actually catch a football, that they're going to win a high-scoring game here. In the other 4:25 game, the Broncos play the Chargers, a very interesting AFC West showdown here. Both teams disappointed pretty big last week. Russell Wilson for not coming to play, throwing 3 interceptions against rookie CJ Stroud, and the LA Chargers for, even though winning, only putting up 6 points against the Patriots. Both sides really need to bounce back, and I think that it could go either way, considering how close these two usually play if you look at last year, for example. I don't really know what to expect. The Chargers in general have been big time disappointing, and aside from that Texans game, the Broncos have been pretty hot lately, but I'm of the belief that it's not going to last for them, and that it's hard for that team to sustain that level of success, and the Chargers are just bound to play better. After putting up 6 points, you'd expect them to probably put up like 24 plus. So I actually am going to go with the Chargers. The Broncos aren't really meant to be playing in high-scoring games, and that is what I think we're going towards. So give me Justin Herbert and the Chargers to come back and have a much better game. And to close out Sunday night, arguably the game of the week, the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Dallas Cowboys. This matchup always delivers. It's always super hype. We saw just a couple of weeks ago when they played, and this time around, the Cowboys are probably feeling a lot more confident than they did the last time, and that's saying something because they almost won in that previous match. You know they want to get revenge for one, but two, aside from that Eagles game, they have been on a tear, just putting up offensive masterclasses left and right, 30 plus points in their sleep. Dak and the boys are feeling it, even winning a shootout against Seattle last week. Dallas are in an excellent place, and they just might be ready to take that jump. And I think they're licking their chops at the fact that they get a rematch already with this Philly team after coming so close and watching them get blown out by the 49ers last week. The Eagles were not ready for prime time at all. They got exposed. They could not deliver in the clutch. They couldn't finish drives. And the sad fact is they're in a pretty tough portion of their schedule, and they've done pretty well so far, winning a lot of close games. And I'm kind of the belief that now they're going to start to bleed a little bit, so to speak. Maybe the fatigue will finally set in with all of these difficult matches all in a row. Maybe their health won't be in the greatest spot. And typically the Eagles and the Cowboys split, at least in recent years. So I'm going to pick the Dallas Cowboys. I think they're in better shape. They have more confidence. They're maybe a bit less tired as they've been beating up on a lot worse teams. So I think they're going to feel good and ready for this game. And they're going to be an Eagles team that really needs the serious wake-up call. I mean, maybe they already got it with the Niners. I could definitely see Philly winning this after getting blown out against them. It might elevate their play even higher and get them even more serious. But I think Dallas are just in the better place right now. And the Eagles are in a really tough situation. So they're going to need at least another game to figure it out. I'll take the Cowboys. And then for some godforsaken reason, there's a Monday night doubleheader with the Titans versus the Dolphins and the Packers versus the Giants. Two games I think most people could honestly care less about. Starting with Miami and Tennessee, I don't really think there's much to say. The Dolphins have a habit of absolutely destroying weak teams, those below 500 teams that can't compete. Their offense usually runs wild. Tyreek Hill goes crazy. Mostert scores touchdowns. They just put up like a gazillion points against teams like the Titans. That's how they've gotten literally all their wins this season, so I don't see why this one would be any different. The Titans did play pretty decent against the Colts last week, so maybe they could actually make it close for a little bit, but over time, just considering the differences in their offenses, the Dolphins are going to pull ahead, and they're going to win this one easily. As for Packers versus Giants, I mean, if it weren't for the last couple of weeks and the Packers looking seriously improved, I'd say maybe this game could be interesting, but Green Bay have seriously elevated their play by beating some big-time teams like the Lions, like the Chiefs, and Jordan Love seriously just looking like a different quarterback compared to the early portions of this season. It really feels to me like this Packers team is finally starting to get into a groove, and they finally are starting to click, and they figured something out on that offense, and I think that's probably going to allow them to win this game against the Giants rather easily. I almost want to pick the Giants as a homer because I want to see them maybe make a late season playoff run, but if we're being realistic, they're probably not going to be able to keep up. They just can't put up any points consistently, and this Packers offense has looked pretty awesome as of late. Christian Watson and Jordan Love are doing their thing, and I think over time they should wear down that Giants defense and get a lot of opportunities because the Giants just can't move the football that well, although it will be interesting to see how the Giants do with a bye week after some rest. Tommy DeVito getting another week of progress under his belt. He is going to be the starter in this game. Maybe the Giants do make it a game. I'd love for that. But realistically, with how the Packers playing at the level they're at, they should be winning this one.